Hey there. Are you ready to unlock a world of brand new, scary stories tonight? Before we dive into it, I want to know, where and when are you watching this? Drop your answers in the comments below and join our community. Make sure to subscribe and smash that like button so you never miss a spine-tingling moment. Now, get comfy, turn off the lights, and now, let's begin. A bond between cousins is a peculiar thing. Not quite brotherhood, but something adjacent. For Cole and me, it had always been effortless. Born the same year, we floated through elementary school side by side, our names forever linked by teachers and classmates alike. He was the steady friend, the unspoken partner in every scrape and adventure. And that Friday afternoon in late May, with summer's heat just beginning to lick at the edges of our California suburb, we were giddy with the uncomplicated thrill of a weekend stretching before us, endless and ordinary. His house was our usual haunt that year, a single-story ranch with a sprawling backyard where we staged elaborate battles with sticks and imagined ourselves heroes. That evening was meant to be simple. Junk food, video games, the kind of unremarkable night only kids fully appreciate. Then the call came. My mother's voice, tight with that strange blend of worry and forced calm, told us Grandpa was in the hospital. Nothing serious, she assured me, just a precaution, an overnight stay for observation. But family duty called, which meant both our parents would be at the hospital with Grandma, and I was cleared to stay the night with Cole. Hunter, his older brother, would be in charge. Hunter at 15 was what we hoped to be at that age. Confident without arrogance, authoritative without being a tyrant. He didn't lord his seniority over us, and for that, we adored him. The three of us sprawled in the living room, demolishing a pepperoni pizza, laughing too loud, the world outside the windows dimming into twilight. Night settled, and with it came the knock. 3 sharp raps against the front door, too crisp for the lazy rhythm of a neighbor dropping by. Cole, ever the obliging host, trotted to answer it. I lingered behind, half watching from the hallway as he pulled open the door. 2 men stood beneath the porch light. Late 20s, maybe early 30s, their faces caught between smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. City workers, they claimed. There'd been reports of water pressure problems in the neighborhood. Cole, ever polite, parroted the script drilled into us. My parents aren't available right now, but the men lingered. Their questions grew more insistent. Could they check our taps? The water heater? Hunter materialized behind Cole then, his voice casual but firm. Everything's fine here. Maybe try next door. A silence stretched just a second too long before they nodded and turned away. The door clicked shut. We exchanged glances, shrugged. Just a weird encounter, nothing more. Night pressed on. We retreated to Hunter and Cole's room, the familiar sanctuary of bunk beds and shared secrets. They stripped to their briefs without a second thought, and after a beat of hesitation, I followed suit, the unfamiliarity of it prickling at my skin. But this was normal for them, just boys being boys. I drifted off to the sound of their voices, low and drowsy, teasing about school crushes and summer plans. Then later, I woke to the cold press of dread. A full bladder dragged me from sleep, and I slipped out of the sleeping bag, padding to the bathroom in the dark. The house was too still, too silent. On my way back, a noise from the family room prickled the hairs on my neck. A scrape, a muffled shuffle. Hunter must be up, I thought. But no, when I nudged the bedroom door open, both brothers were there, breathing slow in sleep. Ice flooded my veins. I shook them awake, my whisper jagged. there's someone in the house." They didn't question it. We crept down the hall, 3 shadows in underwear, hearts hammering. The family room glowed faintly with pre-dawn light. And there they were, the same 2 men from the door, now rifling through drawers, their backs momentarily turned. Then one pivoted, a glint of metal in his hand knife, blade catching the dim light. We didn't think, didn't speak, just moved. The front door's lock, usually stubborn, gave way under our fumbling. Cold air hit bare skin as we spilled onto the lawn. As we stepped outside, a miracle unfolded before our eyes. A cop car was driving by at that very moment. We flagged him down, our voices trembling as we told him about the intruders in the house. The cop called for backup, and within minutes, several police cars arrived, their sirens slicing through the quiet of the night. The officers entered the house, and after a thorough search, they caught the 2 men. It was discovered that the intruders had entered through a window in the laundry room that had a broken latch. They had likely targeted the house because, although it wasn't empty, they had realized there were no adults present, believing that if we discovered them, we would be easier to handle than adults. As we waited outside for the police to finish their search, the neighbors began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Among them were kids from our school, including several in our 6th grade class. It was then that the 3 of us realized, with a mix of horror and embarrassment, that we were still dressed only in our briefs, just like in some stereotypical nightmare. We stood there, exposed and vulnerable, for what felt like an eternity, unable to go back inside until the police gave us the all clear. When we finally returned to school the following Monday, the incident became a source of endless teasing. Cole and I had to endure snickering, stares, and ribbing from our classmates for the remaining weeks of the school year. The summer eventually came, putting an end to the taunts, but the memory of that night, both terrifying and humiliating, remains in my mind. The invitation had seemed innocent enough, just a birthday party for a guy I knew from school. Not a close friend, but friendly enough that when he asked me to stay over afterward, I shrugged and said yes. It was 2006. Cell phones weren't yet the lifeline they'd become, and at 12 years old, I was old enough to stay at a friend's house without raising suspicion. Just 2 kids hanging out after cake and games. Harmless. His house was normal. A 2-story suburban home with a too bright living room where leftover balloons sagged against the walls. The party had been loud, full of laughter, and the kind of chaos only middle schoolers can conjure. But as the last guest trickled out, the air thickened. A door closed soft, almost imperceptible, and I felt the first prickle of unease. The boy, let's call him Daniel, smiled at me as he locked his bedroom door. Not a playful grin, but something measured, anticipatory. "Hey," he said, voice light. "You ever seen one of these?" He pulled out a military-grade flashlight, thick as my forearm, the kind that could split the dark like a blade. Then, deliberately, he clicked it on. The beam cut through the dim room, a harsh white line carving shadows into sharp relief. I remember thinking it was cool. Wrong. His other hand held a camera. "You mind if I ask you some questions?" he said, still smiling. I laughed. Sure?" Wrong answer. The questions started normal. Favorite movies, hobbies. Then they twisted private things no 12-year-old should be asked to describe. Each time my answer wasn't enough, or I hesitated, or outright refused, the flashlight came down. Not a flick to the arm, not a playful jab, a swing, thudding against my ribs, my back, my shoulder. Every hit landed like a punctuation mark. I tried to laugh it off at first, dude. Stop. Haha. Not funny, but his expression never wavered. That smile never left. Just the flashlight, rising and falling. The camera, watching. Recording. Time stretched, elastic. I couldn't leave, the door was locked, and even if I made it past him, he was huge. A literal giant, towering over me. His limbs too long, his hands too large. Gigantism, I'd later learn. At the time, all I knew was that he was strong, and I was just a kid. Then, a reprieve. "I gotta piss," he announced, casual, wiping his palms on his jeans. The door shut behind him. The lock clicked. I was alone. Panic clawed its way up my throat. No cell phone, no way out. The house outside the door was silent. No parents home, no one to hear me if I screamed. But on his desk, glossy and foreign in the dim light, sat his phone. I lunged. My fingers shook as I dialed my home number. No answer. Of course not, it was late. I left a voicemail, whispering through tears, barely coherent. "Mom, please come get me. Please. He's hurting me. I don't know what to do." I hung up. The lock rattled. He was back. 3 hours. That's how long it took for my mom to listen to the message, to drive across town, to bang on the door until he finally unlocked it. When she saw me, I was curled in a corner, arms wrapped around my knees, my face raw from crying. Bruises dappled my skin like ink blots. The camera sat on the desk, taunting. Daniel waved at my mom as if nothing were wrong. "He had a bad dream," he said. She didn't believe him. I never went back to school with him, never spoke his name again. But sometimes, in the dark, I still see the arc of that flashlight, hear the click of the camera, and I am 12 again, small and afraid. And I remember, not all monsters live under the bed. Some smile at you across a classroom and invite you to sleep over. "12 years have passed, yet the memories of that night remain etched in my mind with a vivid clarity that time cannot fade. I was just a young teenager of 14, and I had the opportunity to visit an old friend whom I hadn't seen in years. The excitement of reconnecting with someone from my past was palpable, and his family always treated me like one of their own. His parents, warm and welcoming, made me feel right at home. He lived on a sprawling 20-acre ranch, a paradise of open space, with the added thrill of having guns around something that always intrigued a curious teen like me. The ranch was also home to 2 loyal ranch dogs and a cat that roamed freely. That evening, we settled into his family's camper, positioned on the driveway, the soft glow of the screen illuminating our faces as we watched horror movies. The camper was a cocoon of comfort, the darkness outside adding to the eerie ambiance of our movie night. The family was inside the main house, while we enjoyed our privacy outside. Around midnight, we decided to head inside for pizza, popcorn, and other junk food, our version of a late-night snack. My friend, overcome by the comfort of the evening, fell asleep early, retiring to bed by 2 a.m. I, however, was engrossed in a game of GTA, the virtual world a stark contrast to the quiet, still night around me. Then it happened. The dogs, usually calm, began to bark furiously. At first, I dismissed it as a false alarm. Perhaps one of the ducks or chickens had wandered too close, or maybe a deer or coyote had wandered into the ranch. I brushed it off, telling myself it was nothing. But about 20 to 30 minutes later, an urge to take a piss compelled me to step outside. And that's when I saw a face peering back at me from the darkness. The sight of those eyes, filled with malice and intent, sent a chill down my spine. The figure then darted off into the night, heading towards the entrance of the ranch. I stood there, frozen, the adrenaline pumping through my veins. Sure, I was alarmed, but needs must. I finished my business and returned to the camper, making sure to lock the door behind me. I tried to shake off the encounter, convincing myself it was just a trick of the shadows, and went back to my game. However, fate had more in store for that night. About another 20 to 30 minutes passed, and the dog started barking again, this time even more frantically. The noise was unmistakable, and a sense of dread began to creep over me. I woke my friend, who was initially skeptical. But when he peeked out the blinds of the camper, his face changed dramatically. The color drained from his cheeks, and his eyes were wide with fear. We exchanged a look, the unspoken understanding passing between us that something was very wrong. We called his parents, and his dad answered. We told him everything, trying to sound calm, but the panic in my voice was unmistakable. My friend, usually the more vocal one, had handed the phone to me. His dad, thinking we were trying to pull a prank, laughed and said, "Y'all boys aren't gonna get me. Nice try, though." But then he heard the genuine fear in my voice, and his tone changed. He quickly rushed out, gun in hand, threatening to shoot anyone who was on their property at this odd hour. From inside the camper, we heard everything. The sound of his father's footsteps, the rustling of the grass, and then an ear-piercing scream that made our blood run cold. Following the scream, 3 gunshots rang out, echoing through the night. We sat in terrified silence, hearts pounding, waiting for we didn't know what. Moments later, we gathered the courage to go outside, and what we saw will be imprinted in my memory forever. There, on the ground, lay a man. He was motionless, and next to him, one of the ranch dogs lay lifeless, probably killed by the intruder. The sight was horrifying, and my friend's youngest sister, whom we'll call Jacqueline, was crying. She was terrified, not just by the dead man who lay about 20 feet in front of her, but also because of the loss of one of the family's beloved pets. Then, the cops arrived. Living in the country, the police took about 25 to 30 minutes to show up. When they finally did, they took control of the situation. It turned out that the man was a prison escapee from a facility just 15 miles away. He had broken out of prison and was on the run, but his reason for being there remains a mystery to this day. He was arrested and put back behind bars for killing 2 people previously. To this day, we don't know if he was there to harm us, or if we were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The experience left an indelible mark on all of us, a night that we would never forget. The rain tapped a slow, deliberate rhythm against the windows, each drop like a finger tracing a secret message only the night could understand. I sat cross-legged on the cold concrete, the camping lantern between us throwing a small circle of trembling light. The basement smelled of old boxes, dust, and the faint sweetness of chocolate chips we'd stolen from the kitchen, small comforts against the large, patient house. Lena sat beside me, her long black hair falling like ink over her shoulder as she braided and unbraided the strands with practiced fingers. Her hands made a quiet, steady music. Behind us, the others whispered and laughed, voices muffled by the thick walls and the constant hum of the ancient refrigerator. that sounded, in the dark, like a distant engine. "Do you hear that?" I asked, leaning toward her without meaning to. She paused, eyes narrowing in the halo of the lantern. "Hear what?" A soft scratch, thin as a fingernail against wood, came from the wall beside us. I swallowed so hard my throat clicked. "There," I whispered. "From the wall." Lena shrugged, but the braid in her hand trembled. "Old houses make noises," she said, as if the words could stitch the feeling back together. She tried to make her laugh small and easy. I forced a smile, too, because it felt wrong to let the others see how hollow my chest was. We'd chosen Maya's grandma's basement because it looked the part. Creaking floorboards, spiderweb curtains in corners, and a smell of must and old paper that clung to your clothes like a story waiting to be told. We brought flashlights, a camera we barely knew how to use, and a Ouija board bought from a thrift store because rituals, even silly ones, make the dark seem smaller. As the night unraveled, the house did its work, little betrayals of age. The lights dimmed, not in a theatrical blackout, but with a weary inhale, and Lena's knuckles went white where she gripped her braid. Then came the whispers. Thin, almost apologetic, threading through silence like someone unwilling to be heard. "Did you hear that?" Maya breathed. We all nodded, like agreeing to a shared hallucination. The whispers returned, a susurration of vowels and breath, not words so much as impressions like a language remembered from the edge of a dream. We flashed our torches, and the beams cut through the darkness, revealing motes of dust and the hollowed faces of cardboard boxes. Nothing moved but the lantern's light and our small, human breaths. "Let's do the Ouija board," I said, and my voice wanted to be brave. We arranged ourselves around the worn board. Our fingertips hovered over the planchette, small, nervous, almost reverent. For a moment, nothing happened, just the sound of our blood in our ears. Then, with a tiny, shocking jolt, the planchette slid to M. We all jumped. A nervous giggle tried to pass for reason. Okay, Lena said, but her voice was thin. That was just us. The planchette moved again. E, L, E. "Melody," Maya whispered. The name landed in the room like cold water. Melody, who had lived here years ago and then stopped being part of any story anyone told. The planchette spelled it out with calm, inevitable letters, M-E-L-O-D-Y. A child's voice, impossibly near, said, "Help me." We screamed as if the house itself had opened its mouth. The board clattered to the floor, our chairs scraped, and panic unspooled inside us. "Don't leave me alone," the voice repeated, more plaintive, smaller than any of us expected. Lena pushed her chair back so hard she nearly tipped. "We have to get out of here," she cried, and the rest of us followed without thinking, stumbling up the stairs, through the kitchen, out into the rain that swallowed our footsteps. We didn't stop until we reached the street, where the rain cooled the heat under our skins and made our laughter come out thin and brittle. The next day at the park, soaked and shivering in laughter that was half relief, we tried to stitch the night into something sensible. "I thought I was gonna die," Lena said, wrapping her arms around herself. Her voice had holes in it where the night had been. Maya's hands shook as she laughed. We offered guesses: wind, a rat, ghosts and half-jokes meant to bridge the gap between fear and reason. But the truth was quieter than the fear had been, and it came back to me in small, domestic ways. When I walked past Maya's grandma's house to return something the next week, I noticed the basement window, one of the panes was cracked and open an inch, the latch bent. The boxes we'd leaned against that wall were not sealed. Their flaps sighed with the wind. In the corner, near where we'd sat, a great silken web drooped, a ghost-made drapery, and its thread rasped against the cardboard every time the air moved. Memory rewrites itself kindly, so I had to remind mine. The whispers were the house speaking the language of wind through broken glass and stacked paper. The light's flicker had been a tired bulb, not a dying spirit. And the planchette, when I pictured it the way our fingers had pressed, just a breath apart, how we all leaned in, because leaning in is what you do when you invite a story to start. There were small, involuntary nudges. People call it the ideomotor effect movement, produced by the mind without conscious will. But at the time it felt like something else entirely. The board answering in the only way it could, with the tiny pressures of our own wanting. The voice, soft and pleading, was the part that took Lena to come clean. She didn't shout or produce a confession in the park. She gave it like a small animal returning to its hole. Her braid was undone, hair wet from the rain. And when our laughter thinned, she looked at us and then at the house and said quietly, "I thought it would be funny. I was going to freak you out, whisper from behind that box. I only meant to scare you. I didn't think." Her words trailed off. There was embarrassment and something deeper. Shame, the sour kind that comes when a joke becomes a thing that can't be taken back. We were angry for an instant, then ashamed, then mostly relieved. Lena's prank had worked in the worst possible way because it used the shape of what we already feared. She had mimicked a child's pitch, a tremble she learned from old stories about melody, and it thinned into something real inside our ears. None of it was supernatural, exactly. It was human logic and accident wrapped together: the wind, the web, the board, a friend trying to make the night more thrilling. That's what we were. A cluster of trembling, giggling kids in a house that did what old houses do: threaten meaning, so we'd throw one on it. We had made a story out of nothing, and then let the story make something of us. But even if the explanation was ordinary, the terror had been real. The air had tasted like metal. My hands had not stopped shaking for hours. If there was any small consolation, it was that our fear had been honest, and our laughter afterward even truer. We kept the story because stories are how we hold what scares us at arm's length. We told it at sleepovers and at lunchtime, smoothing the edges until the memory fit a joke. Next time, let's pick somewhere normal like a McDonald's parking lot, I said once, and we all laughed. Sometimes the scariest things are the ones we manufacture half imagination, half accident, then hand to each other like a dare. Sometimes the worst of it is a prank that went too far. And sometimes the best way to survive is to choose afterwards to laugh and to forgive. We promised, with solemn teenage certainty, that we would never go back to that basement. But secretly, perhaps, we kept the memory because it reminded us of the way we stuck together when the house whispered. The truth had a small human heart. We had frightened ourselves, we had frightened each other, and in the end, we had found our way back to one another in the bright, ridiculous safety of daylight.